Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and I am happy to be with you on another Friday for another episode of the Book Review Podcast. As you probably know, June is Pride Month, and at the beginning of June I thought, oh yes, I need to do an episode on LGBTQ authors, books, characters, etc. And then, as time is wont to do, June went whoosh, and here we are, close to the end of June. Thankfully, the wonderful Ella at Wonderland Books sent me a message on Instagram the other day and said, "Are you going to do a Pride episode in June?" And I said yes, and I thought, thank you so much for putting that back on my mental to-do list, because it would have been, probably like July 15th, and I would have went, shoot, I meant to do that. I got to start writing things down. At any rate, LGBTQ plus. My question for you is the same one that I put on social media earlier in the week, and that is, what are your favorite characters, books, authors that deal with this community? It's a huge community, and I realized I realized a few things. One, that I don't have a very wide knowledge of authors who are in the LGBTQ plus community, or characters or books per se, and that's not because of a lack of interest or anything. It's just that my TBR list is always so ginormous, and once again I have fallen down many rabbit holes getting ready for this episode, and that list has gotten longer. But it's just not something that I have read too much on. That is one thing. Second, that there are a ton of books that I have read and talked about on this podcast that have LGBTQ plus characters in them, and so they are out there. Unfortunately, they aren't as well known maybe as some other characters, which is too bad, because I talk a lot about representation on the podcast, and everyone deserves to see themselves in their favorite genres, whether that's movie or television or fiction, whatever it is. Everyone deserves to see representations of themselves in their favorite genres. For me personally, I have friends who are gay and lesbian. I have someone who is very, very dear to me who has recently told me they are asexual. I have two friends from grad school who are transgender. One is transitioning from female to male. The other is transitioning from male to female. You know, when you stop and think about it, you've got a huge community in your life, I'm sure, of people who fall on the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And as I said, they deserve that recognition. So to be represented in books, movies, television, everything, but music, all those good things. But as I said, as I was thinking about some of the books that I've talked about on this podcast, of course, there are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender characters within those books. Once you really start thinking about it, I was looking at a list of characters that fall into this category, and was like, oh duh, I knew that. Oh duh, I knew that. One thing I did not know, because I have not read this book, is the picture of Dorian Gray, which is referenced all the time, and I haven't read it. I'm embarrassed to admit that it is yet another classic that I have not yet found the time to read. But that Dorian Gray was actually gay slash bisexual, and that there was a lot of editing done when it was originally published. It was published as a serial in Lippincotts in the 1890s, and the magazine's editor feared that the story was indecent, so he edited roughly 500 words before publication. This was without Wilde's knowledge. Did I say it's by Oscar Wilde? I don't think I did. Despite the censorship, it's still, the picture of Dorian Gray still offended the moral sensibilities of British book reviewers, some of whom said that Oscar Wilde merited prosecution for violating the laws guarding public morality. In response, Wilde aggressively defended his novel and art in correspondence with the British press. Now I got to read this because, wow, 1890s. Good job, Oscar Wilde. I had an inkling, but it wasn't fully realized until I saw this article and went, oh, yes. Other characters that made me say, well, duh, and that I have talked about on this podcast. I've talked about the Diana Gabaldon books, and Lord John Grey is in that series. He actually also has spin-offs from that series. He is gay. That series takes place partly in the 1700s, so gay in a time when it was certainly not acceptable, and he has to hide that part of himself a lot of the time. Other characters, well, Albus Dumbledore didn't come out as gay exactly, but J.K. Rowling admitted after the series that in her mind Albus Dumbledore is gay. Well, was, I guess he's one fiction and two no longer living. Then the Rick Riordan has several series, and in his series, the Magnus Chase series, there is a transgender character. I've talked about that character before, Alex Fierro. In his Gods of Olympus or Percy Jackson series, there is the character of Nico D'Angelo, and he comes out as gay in that book, is in a relationship in the second series, as well as, I'm trying to think, there may be others that I'm just not remembering. But then also the Shadowhunters series, which I have also talked about on other episodes of the podcast. That is by Cassandra Clare. And there are numerous characters in this story. The one that came to mind immediately was Alec Lightwood and Magnus Bane, who are a couple. Not only are they a gay couple, but they are also an interspecies couple, I guess. Alec is a shadow hunter and Magnus is an immortal warlock. And they are not only gay, but they are now raising children together. Let's see. Helen Blackthorne is a shadow hunter. She is she's half shadow hunter, half fairy, and she is a lesbian in relationship with another female shadow hunter. Mark Blackthorne is bisexual, possibly pansexual, not really sure how he might describe himself. Elves, he's half elf as well as is Helen, so they have kind of different experiences. But there is also Michael Wayland, Kieran Lean, Penhollow, and then Diana Rayburn. I had forgotten that in one of the recent books, her story was told, and she is also transgender. So there are a lot of characters in that book. So I'm really impressed with the amount of representation in that series, and it doesn't feel like it's just forced in. Oh, I need these characters because I need this representation. No, it's just who they are. It's just part of their story, and part of the overall story only comes into play as any relationships come into play. So those are a few of the characters from some of the books that I have already talked about on this podcast. And then, as I said, I put out the question of who are your favorite authors, favorite characters, favorite books, etc. from the LGBTQ plus community, and got some great answers, which then sent me down a couple of rabbit holes. We are going to go exploring in those rabbit holes after the first break. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. We are celebrating Pride this June with some books and characters and authors from the LGBTQ plus community. As I mentioned before the break, I asked the question on Instagram, what are your favorite characters, your favorite authors, your favorite books, etc. And the first answer I got actually is from an author who has been on the podcast a couple of times. Cynthia Diamond writes the Weird Love series, and that's urban contemporary fantasy and romance. If you don't remember or haven't heard those interviews, she writes those series, and she should have been in the list of the first segment when I was talking about characters of books that I've talked about on this podcast, because she does have some characters that fall into that category. She's got some gay characters in hers, and I think she's planning on writing the story of two of those characters in an upcoming book, so looking forward to that. But she answered my question with pretty much anything by @GallagherWit, and so I went down one of those rabbit holes and found Gallagher Witt's web page. On that page, there are books by L.A. Witt, books by Lauren Gallagher, books by Anne Gallagher, books by Lori A. Witt. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. Is it a bunch of people? Are they related? How does this work? And on the About page, it says, of course, it would seem a bit silly to have a single site for multiple authors who aren't collaborating, but therein lies the rub. We're all the same person. Yes, it's true. But why use multiple names? Simple. Different names write in different genres. L.A. Witt writes almost exclusively gay male romance, including everything from contemporary to science fiction, plus some trans and genderqueer. Lauren Gallagher writes heterosexual, lesbian, and bisexual romances. Lori A. Witt sticks to the sci-fi, fantasy, and mainstream suspense, both of which may contain some LGBT and or romantic elements, but are predominantly science fiction fantasy. Anne Gallagher writes sweet romances and young adult, including asexual romances. And finally, Diana Fire writes horror, coming soon. So the different names just help readers quickly find the stories that interest them without needing to search through genres that don't. I love that. I love that there are so many different genres, and that this author, whoever he or she may actually be in real life, writes so many different kinds of genres, and that there is so much diversity and so many people and lifestyles represented in the books that are listed here. So if any of those sound interesting to you, then you should definitely check out this page. It is just www.gallagherwit.com. Easy enough. And then you find not only, you don't just get one author, well, one person, but under many names. 1, 2, 3, 4, looks like about 5 different names that this person is writing under. So I think that's cool, and I'm going to look into that and check it out. I also am intrigued by the young adult asexual romances that I might be able to recommend to my nearest and dearest good friend, to see if that is something that they might be interested in. So yay, I love learning something new. I love adding authors to my to-be-read list. which will never be finished, ever. But that's okay. It's a challenge I gladly accept. As I mentioned, At Wonderland Books is the person who helped jog my memory to do this episode, so I'm grateful to her. And she also responded to my social media post with a long list of books and authors that she likes, a couple of which I would like to highlight. The first is one that I had heard of and heard really good things about, but have not yet had a chance to read. That is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. This is from April 1st, 2014. First of all, it's got a great name. It's got a great looking cover. It's a Prins Honor book. It's got a ton of badges on the front, so it looks like it's very well acclaimed. Aristotle is an angry teen with a brother in prison. Dante is a know-it-all who has an unusual way of looking at the world. When the two meet at the swimming pool, they seem to have nothing in common, but as the loners start spending time together, they discover that they share a special friendship, the kind that changes lives and lasts a lifetime. And it is through this friendship that Ari and Dante will learn the most important truths about themselves and the kind of people they want to be. And I guess I should tell you the author of this. That is Benjamin, Alire Sens. And that is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. So, young adult, and looks very good. I like it. Other books, let's see, by Benjamin. He's got really great covers. I like them. The Inexplicable Logic of My Life. That sounds like my life. It's got inexplicable logic, or possibly it's not logic at all. But yeah, I am interested. That's another author to add to my list. And if you have read any of his books, I would love to hear your thoughts. The other, well, she recommended a bunch. The other one that caught my attention was The Miseducation of Cameron Post, because I have, again, heard of that before. It is by Emily M. Danforth. It came out in paperback May 28th, 2013. And the description of that, it's also, it has been made into a film starring Chloe Grace Moritz, and that was very well received at the Sundance Film Festival. But The Miseducation of Cameron Post is a stunning and provocative literary debut that was named to numerous Best of the Year lists. When Cameron Post's parents die suddenly in a car crash, her shocking first thought is relief. Relief they'll never know that hours earlier she had been kissing a girl. But that relief doesn't last, and Cam is forced to move in with her conservative Aunt Ruth and her well-intentioned but hopelessly old-fashioned grandmother. She knows that from this point on, her life will forever be different. Survival in Miles City, Montana means blending in and leaving well enough alone, and Cam becomes an expert at both. Then Coley Taylor moves to town. Beautiful pickup driving Coley is a perfect cowgirl with the perfect boyfriend to match. She and Cam form an unexpected and intense friendship, one that seems to leave room for something more to emerge. But just as that starts to seem like a real possibility, Aunt Ruth takes drastic action to fix her niece, bringing Cam face to face with the cost of denying her true self, even if she's not quite sure who that is. So really, really want to read this book, not only because I've heard good things about it, but also it takes place in Miles City, Montana. That is really, really eastern Montana. I grew up in western Montana, and Miles City is practically to North Dakota. Not that North Dakota is a bad place, it's just a way of describing how far it is in Montana, which is a very large state. And it is... Oh man, now I gotta read this, because if the author really does know Miles City, then she knows it's not a good place to be different, or... Oh, yeah, I can only imagine trying to come out in Miles City, or to live... Oh, look, she was born and raised in Miles City. Excellent! She knows what she's talking about then. Definitely going on my to-be-read list, because Montana, yay, and, looking forward to that story. There are others, of course. One of the authors that At Wonderland Books suggested is, David Levithan. And he writes, he's got a whole ton of books listed on his website. He says he talks about how he doesn't like writing about himself. He'd rather talk about his books. This is the About Me page. I totally relate to that. It's how do you figure out what you're supposed to write in those little short biographies? But he says, I am much happier talking about my books than I am talking about myself. My first novel, Boy Meets Boy, started as a story I wrote for my friends for Valentine's Day, something I've done for the past 22 years and counting, which is really sweet, and it turned itself into a teen novel. When not writing during spare hours on weekends, I am editorial director at Scholastic and the founding editor of the Push imprint, which is devoted to finding new voices and new authors in teen literature. With Boy Meets Boy, I basically set out to write the book that I dreamed of getting as an editor, a book about gay teens that doesn't conform to the old norms about gay teens in literature, i.e., it has to be about a gay uncle or a teen who gets beaten up for being gay, or about outcasts who come out and find they're still outcasts, albeit outcast with their outcastedness in common. I'm often asked if the book is a work of fantasy or a work of reality, and the answer is right down the middle. It's about where we are going and where we should be. Of Boy Meets Boy, the reviewer at Booklist wrote, in its blithe acceptance and celebration of human difference, this is arguably the most important gay novel since Annie on My Mind, and seems to represent a revolution in the publishing of gay-themed books for adolescents, which pretty much blew me away when I read it. Viva la revolution. And then his About Me page goes on from there, talking about his books. I am definitely going to add this author as well to my to-be-read list. Oh, I love rabbit holes that take me so many fabulous places with fabulous books that will take me forever to get to. But again, as I mentioned when I was going to the last break, I am up for that challenge. Just keep on adding books to that TBR list. We are going to take our second break of the podcast. When we come back, we'll be wrapping up this episode, so stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. For this last segment, I did as I often do and just went and Googled, lists of books in this particular category, LGBTQ+, to see what was out there. And of course, there's a million and, a million that I now want to read. But a few that are from this list, which is from, let's see, what website did this one come from? PenguinRandomHouse.com. The first one on this list is called We Are Everywhere by Matthew Reamer and Leighton Brown. It is actually a photographic history of the queer liberation movement from the creators and curators of the massively popular Instagram account at LGBT history, released in time for the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. And actually, that is a good reminder that this is the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots. So this is, Pride Month is incredibly important anyway, but historically, this is the 50th anniversary. So it's even more important that we continue to advocate and be allies and talk about these incredibly important human rights issues. So, what else is on this list? Boy Erased by, it's Garrard, Gerard, not sure, Conley. This is a memoir, and through an institutionalized 12-step program, Gerard Conley was supposed to emerge heterosexual. Instead, even when faced with a harrowing and brutal journey, Gerard found the strength and understanding to break out in search of his true self and forgiveness. Oh, that one sounds really good, but it sounds like it's going to be heartbreaking because of the just the nature of the 12-step program, trying to reverse what nature has created. Modern Her Story by Blair Imani is an inspiring and radical celebration of 70 women, girls, and gender non-binary people who have changed and are still changing the world from the civil rights movement and Stonewall riots through Black Lives Matter and beyond. What else? Let's see what is next. Tomorrow Will Be Different by Sarah McBride. Before she became the first transgender person to speak at a national political convention in 2016, at the age of 26, Sarah McBride struggled with the decision to come out, not just to her family, but to the students of American University, where she was serving as student body president. She'd known she was a girl from her earliest memories, but it wasn't until the Facebook post announcing her truth went viral that she realized just how much impact her story could have on the country. And then Sissy by Jacob Tobia. I love the cover of this. It's a memoir, and it's very sort of, I can't think of the art style it's in, but kind of classic 50s looking, and then with all the dots and stuff. Oh, what is that art? I'm sorry, art people, you're probably screaming at the podcast right now. I'll stop. This is a coming of gender story, and it is described as a heart-wrenching, eye-opening, and giggle-inducing memoir about what it's like to grow up not sure if you're A, a boy, B, a girl, C, something in between, or D, all of the above. I just like the description. Between the cover and the description, I totally want to read that, because if the one-line description can make me laugh and pull at my heartstrings, then clearly I need to put that book on my list. Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde is the essential writings of Black lesbian poet and feminist writer Audre Lorde. In this charged collection of 15 essays and speeches, Lorde takes on sexism, racism, ageism, homophobia, and class, and propounds social difference as a vehicle for action and change. Ruby Fruit Jungle by Rita Mae Brown. In Body, Moving Prose, Rita Mae Brown tells the story of Molly Bolt, the adoptive daughter of a poor Southern couple who boldly forges her own path in America. With her startling beauty and crackling wit, Molly finds that women are drawn to her wherever she goes, and she refuses to apologize for loving them back. And then this one I'm really fascinated by, Eleanor and Hick by Susan Quinn. A warm, intimate account of the love between Eleanor Roosevelt and reporter Lorena Hickok, a relationship that over more than 3 decades transformed both women's lives and empowered them to play significant roles in one of the most tumultuous periods in American history. If you listened to the podcast a couple weeks ago, you know that I have a fascination with First Ladies, so I definitely need to check this one out, because I need to know more about Eleanor Roosevelt, and something that you don't often hear about. This list goes on and on. It's great. I could keep going, but you can do that as well. Oh, Ask a Queer Chick. I like the cover. It's got cute little chicks all over it, but it is a guide to sex, love, and life for girls who dig girls by Lindsay King Miller. The list just goes on and on. It's great. If you are looking for a comprehensive list, I recommend you check out this list. Again, it is from Penguin Random House, and let's see, just www.penguinrandomhouse.com/the read down the ultimate book of list. Yeah, just Google LGBTQ books or books to read during Pride or something like that. I'm sure it will come up, because this list just goes on and on. There is A Life of Gore Vidal. Eddie Izzard's book is listed on here. There's so many books on here that I could just keep sharing with you, but again, I'll let you go do your own discovering, because I now have to go bookmark this page so that I can start reading or find time. I don't know. I keep saying that. Find time. Can we just add extra hours to the day? Could we call them reading hours so that they don't have to be taken up with work or housework or anything else? They could just be extra hours in addition to the regular 24. Somehow we need to make it so that it wouldn't affect like circadian rhythms and all those things, but they could just be for reading. Is that possible? Can we work on that? Somebody out there, please? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the GSMC Book Review Podcast. Please join me again next week when we will again have our Tuesday interview. This time it will be with Karen Stefano, or Stefano. I need to double check with her how she pronounces her last name. And it is a memoir, and it is about surviving an assault and the consequences of that. It's called What the Body Remembers, and just, well, as you can imagine, what the body remembers, dealing with PTSD, dealing with triggers, all of those things that happen after a traumatic incident like that. And it's really engaging. It reads like a novel. So join me for that interview on Tuesday. In the meantime, have a wonderful weekend. And even though we don't have extra hours in the day that are designated for reading hours, I do hope you find time to get lost in a good book.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.